So, as you already know, my name's Erin Ailworth. Uh, I grew up, like I said, in California, and I basically decided when I was 7 that I wanted to be a journalist. Someone in my family handed me a newspaper and asked me to read something about, out of it for some reason. I can't remember what, but I don't know why. I was entranced by the newspaper. And so at 7, I was like, going to be a reporter. And basically, everything I've done since then is in pursuit of that goal. So when I was 16, I went to this high school journalism program, like this 6-week boot camp at Northwestern, which is known as the top journalism school in the U.S. And and that was amazing and fun. Plus, I got to live in Chicago for 6 weeks at Northwestern as a 16-year-old. Like, how liberating is that? And I saw fireflies for the first time while I was there and experienced a really terrible humidity while I was there, although it's not as bad as the humidity in Houston. Um, and so after that program, I basically decided Northwestern was where I wanted to go to college, and thank God they let me in. Uh, so I did that. Did an internship my junior year in Tucson, Arizona, where I worked for the now defunct Tucson Citizen. No longer exists, which is really sad, but met some wonderful people there. Actually, a colleague, or a former colleague, who now works here at the Houston Chronicle. And I got really into journalism. I joined the National Association of Hispanic Journalists. I'm half Mexican, although you wouldn't be able to tell by my name. Thanks, Dad. And met some wonderful journalists through that organization. There's um, an annual conference every year. So we get together, we meet up, we talk newspapers, we talk TV news, we talk radio, we talk online, and we basically just have fun and learn new things about the industry. And so after college, I got an internship, or excuse me, a fellowship. Oh my gosh, my fellowship coordinator is gonna be mad if he ever hears I called it an internship. I got a fellowship at the LA Times as part of what's called METPRO, the Minority Editorial Training Program. And it's a 1-year It was a 1-year fellowship at the LA Times, and then 1 year at one of the other papers owned by Tribune, which owns the LA Times. And so after my 1 year in LA, I went to the Orlando Sentinel, sister paper. Spent 3 years there, covering crazy Florida news. A lot of crime, a lot of natural disasters. And then because of NAHJ, I had met a bunch of people who worked at the Boston Globe. And one day, an editor at the Boston Globe called me up and interviewed me. And I hate to say it, but I probably didn't equip myself well in that interview. But luckily, I had people watching out for me. And I got a second interview face-to-face with the man who is now the editor-in-chief of the Boston Globe, Brian McGrory. I had to drive myself all the way to Miami from Orlando, which is quite the distance for a 30-minute interview. But ended up in Boston for 7 years, first covering a couple of cities, and then moving on to the business desk and writing about energy. And luckily, in the end, at the Boston Globe, I ended up with this wonderful editor named Rob Gavin, who was just a wonderful mentor and advocate who taught me how to be a business reporter and an energy reporter. And at a certain point, when I decided to go after the job at the Wall Street Journal, totally supported that decision, helped me make it happen. So, and now I've been here in Houston for 2 years, and I got here and then the energy bus started, so oops. But I have been a disaster reporter for a while, so sorry. The stress is a little the stress and the deadlines, although I guess reporters kind of thrive under both of those things. I really like talking to people and going into situations that a lay person, if you will, a non-journalist would never have the chance to see. I mean, I've covered Hurricane Katrina. I've covered the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. I've talked to presidents. I currently talk to billionaires. I go out onto oil and gas rigs. You know, I chat with the Fed. I mean, what other career do you have that you do all of those things, and do you get to be the eyes and the ears for other people? I mean, I really do see my job as opening a door, or at least a window into another community, or a situation that you might not otherwise experience yourself. And my job is to bring you into that and to make you feel it, or to make you understand why it's important, why this particular story is on the front page or on the front of B1, why it matters to you, even if you don't think it does. One of my favorite stories, and it wasn't a huge difference, but one of my favorite stories, when I was in Orlando, this kid was riding his bike, and he was riding his bike with his friend, and he was riding it along a 6-lane thoroughfare. And his dad had always told him, like, listen, this is a heavily trafficked thoroughfare. It's 6 lanes. It's pretty wide. If you ever don't feel safe trying to cross it, call me and I'll come get you. But one day, he and his friend are out riding bikes, and they try and cross this thoroughfare, and the kid doesn't make it, and he dies. And I have to write his obituary, and it was really sad. I had talked to his family, I talked to his siblings, his mom, and they just tell me, what this kid was like, that he, was something of a daredevil, a goof, a jokester, that he wanted to be, a Hollywood stuntman. And so I end up writing his obituary, and at the end, his mom had told me, gosh, and she made this remark, like, I didn't even think she thought about it. It was just something, that she expressed, because a lot of people, when they talk to reporters in circumstances like this, sometimes they feel we're being intrusive, but often, if we're doing our jobs right, it's maybe a little cathartic for them. And so she mentions to me that, gosh, we just don't even know how we're going to pay for his funeral, because you don't really plan for the death of your child, you think you have all the time in the world, and that you as the parent are going to go first. So I put this line in the end of the story, and the very next day, the basketball team in Orlando calls me up, and they basically say, we want to pay for his funeral. That's how you know. It doesn't happen very often, but it happens. And those make everything else worth it.
Well, I listened to your post and found it quite interesting, but I have some questions of my own for you. The first one is not a question but a comment about reporters being intrusive. Well, sometimes they are. We all know that that's a fact. But if you do your job right, I guess it can be cathartic. But what I wonder is, I found the stories very interesting, but here on Varel, we kind of talk about, the foods we like, the weather, our taste and decorations, places we like to eat, the towns we're from. We kind of get a little bit more personal. I don't know. I've heard quite a few of the journalists come on, and you guys seem to stick to your stories pretty much, but other than telling us your name and your town, you don't really tell us anything about who you really are personality-wise. We'd like to know some of those things. Also, what is your basic interest in Vorrail? Are you here as a wanting to be a part of the community? Are you looking for a news story? What is it that the reporters are interested in? I'm certainly curious, and I'd like to know about your curiosity as well.
Hello, Erin. Welcome to the crazy creature that is VO Rail. I've been on here for, I don't know, off and on, I would say, for the last 6 months or so. In between when I have whatever else I have going on. Usually I'm at work on Friday morning, but I have to work late today because I have to work with a client in Brooklyn this afternoon at 4. And by the time I get back out here, it'll probably be well after 8 o'clock. I'm out on Long Island. Anyway, very interesting post, and cool to hear about all the different things that you've gone through and done. That's really awesome. I won't bore you with the details of what my life is and has been, and, well, I can't bore you with the details of what it will be because I don't know. But the question I had is, what draws you to produce print media? What is it about print and the written word specifically that draws you in to be like, yeah, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to... this is how I want to convey things to people. If I were to go into journalism, which, at one point I had considered it, when I was a young boy many, many years ago, when I had considered doing that, I was always drawn to radio and somewhat printed media. And I wonder if your answer would be the same as mine. What drew me into radio and the printed word, for lack of a better way to call it, was the fact that I had the challenge of creating the correct image or to tell a specific story that, the other person could visualize in their head. TV is just, everything's laid out there and you just kind of, whatever, you focus on actually capturing the story in a different way. I would say in some ways, producing video media is more challenging, but it's also easier because it's just all there. You don't have to, you have to figure out how to get the right camera angle and how to get the right stuff to tell the story, but you don't have to focus so much on imagery and things like that. All that's laid out for you. Whereas with radio, the listener has to meet the producer halfway. I would say with printed media, more of the work is on the producer to communicate that story effectively to the reader. It's kind of an interesting way of doing it. I think that the medium of print, or the written word, I say the written word because not everybody does read print, including myself. But it's really a unique, I would call it an art form. So I guess that would be my question to you, is what is it about print and the written word that draws you in more than, say, television or radio or any other form of media?
Thank you for sharing your experiences as a journalist on the Wall Street Journal. It's very interesting to hear from somebody that's actually a journalist on this paper in the UK. It's something we only sort of hear about and always consider to be quite famous. And it's really interesting to hear somebody who's actually works on it. This is Rosie in the UK.
Hey Erin, Liz in Pennsylvania here. Welcome to Varel, and thanks for sharing your story about the little boy. That was really touching.
Yeah, it's really hot out there, but when it gets cold, it snows, so I'm planning to move there because it's a lot cheaper. So, Chicago's nice, I guess. There's a lot of killing, but I think if only you did bad things.